MaXXXine, which is my favorite of the X trilogy thus far, as a fourth installment has not been confirmed, it also has not been denied. So there is still probability in the air that a fourth installment could be added, as the director Ty West has stated that there's possibility for things that could continue to happen, which MaXXXine being the best, like quote-unquote best, is seeming to be a controversial opinion, which I don't think to be fair. You maybe could enlighten me, but I just would like to say my ground first. But before we do begin, I would like to clarify that although the movie is fiction, it is actually rooted in the Richard Ramirez case from 1984 to 1985, the Night Stalkings, which is what he was referred to back then, which is also the killer in the movie. But he also was referred to as the walk-in killer and also the valley intruder. He would break into people's houses and then kill them that way. The movie also does take place in 1985, so this is the Night Stalker in this universe. The actor for MaXXXine and also the producer of the movie, Goth, she said that, quote, "It's not just some big sweeping horror movie that's purely for entertainment value, it's rooted in something." Now, I'm unsure if this is them stating that the movie has come kind of Hollywood expose, or if this is just an inspiration for the killer, but nonetheless, I would just like to state that way we can keep this a respectful place, as it is part of a true story and the death of many people. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and begin with a plot synopsis. MaXXXine begins with a childhood video of MaXXXine from 1959 where she dances the obvious nod to Pearl, and then she recites her iconic line once again. In MaXXXine's introduction, we see her walking through some big doors with the light of the sun behind her, and with each step she fades more and more into view of the camera, which I would just like to say that I always appreciate a dramatic introduction for a character. So in this scene, she is auditioning for the role of, which I cannot remember, but it was something along the lines of Vanessa Lodge or Veronica Lodge, something of the sorts, and that is the main character of the movie in this universe called The Puritan 2, and the first movie was very successful and also featured the character Molly Bennett. She's kind of the scream queen of the time. I would just like to say that she's kind of there for advice to give MaXXXine. She's kind of in the position that MaXXXine wants to be in. In the audition, we see Pearl nail the scene down. Afterwards, she steps outside and she tells all of the girls in the line that they might as well go home because she just nailed that scene. And all the girls kind of just gasp, and I thought this was so cool because I noticed that it was kind of a reference to Pearl, as in that scene there's a line of a bunch of girls auditioning for a role, and Pearl's not nervous, but she's just thinking about how she has to nail this, but she unfortunately was not exactly the look that they were looking for, which was blonde. In this movie, MaXXXine is actually blonde, so I thought that was an obvious reference. So we see that MaXXXine successfully landed the role. She has to prove herself that she is just as good as all of the other girls who can do the role. And then right after this, we get some beautiful just retro credits of MaXXXine's work environment. She tells her friends that she landed the role, so her friends are also adult actors, and they're shocked that she got something outside of adult film. Then they actually invite her to a party where there's a very specific address, Starlight Drive. She declines, and later as they're getting into a car, they tell MaXXXine to be careful as the Night Stalker is out, and she tells them that she can take care of herself. So she walks away, and we see on some TVs just warnings of people what they should be doing. So they're letting people know that they shouldn't travel alone, so they should travel in groups, not to go out at night whenever unnecessary. And MaXXXine is doing all of these things in this very moment. So she travels into an alleyway which has actually red lighting, which I thought was a reference to X, with the scene where Pearl's dancing in the guy's blood in front of the car with all the red lights. So I think that might be a reference, not sure though. At the very end of this alleyway, there's a lock on this gate. The next thing you know, we see a man in leather behind her, and he pulls out a knife. Pearl, MaXXXine, she turns around, the gate wouldn't open. And so then, we turn around and she has a gun in her hand. She's aiming at him and she tells him to get down on his knees, and then she begins to tell him to strip. And he strips and he gets down, and she tells him the last person that tried to fuck with her, she smashed her head in. And then MaXXXine steps on his, not even gonna say it, felt some weight over me, because I noticed that over the course of the film, it shows that MaXXXine is genuinely not afraid of the Night Stalker, and she feels that she can defend herself. And she also feels that everyone else should be able to defend themselves. And after that incident, we see MaXXXine arrive at her second job, which is some type of live peep show. She stands in front of a mirror, and on their side, they can see inside of her just dancing. The man watching her, who she cannot see, is actually the Night Stalker. And then in her apartment with her best friend Leon, who works at a video store next door, and she goes to the door, there's a mail, and it says her name on it, but it doesn't say MaXXXine Meeks, it says MaXXXine Miller. So it is revealed that her maiden name is actually MaXXXine Miller. She watches the VHS as Leon is sleeping on her couch, and it's the police evidence tape that she filmed in X called The Farmer's Daughters. She goes to her friend's video store next door, and she asks him if she can figure out who made the VHS. He says that he can't figure out who made it. He says that he can figure out what locations nearby are still selling this type of VHS. And then we see that the two girls who invited MaXXXine to the Hollywood Hills party have actually passed away, and their bodies are just there and they're marked with satanic symbols. And then MaXXXine receives, I can't remember exactly what it was, a letter or something that says to call a number. So she calls that number outside, and they tell her to arrive to a certain address within the next 15 minutes. So she attends that address, and there's a man who we learn is John Labbitt, but he is a private investigator, and he informs her that her previous crimes will be revealed if she does not attend that Starlight Drive address that night. So then later, two LAPD detectives, whose names were Torres and Williams, arrive later to ask her some questions involving the night stalking killings, because she is the common denominator of each killing. But MaXXXine states that she does not speak with police, and she shuts the door on their face. Later, when MaXXXine's driving her car, we see John Labbitt teasing her, and she puts on her knuckle device, she gets out of her car, and she starts punching him until he bleeds out, and then she warns him to stay away from her before she drives off. And then later, when she's supposed to attend the Starlight Drive address, she ignores it and she practices her script, and she's highlighting. And then we see her friend Leon in the video store, and so he closes the shop. And then we see MaXXXine highlighting her script, and just as she goes to mark down, we see Leon being stabbed rapidly. And then there's script, the text is coming on, and it's saying exactly what's happening to Leon, but it's happening to another character in her movie. And unfortunately, her friend Leon dies. And then the next day, when she's awoken, I believe she gets a phone call. She's speaking with her agent, I'm not sure, but she gets up, she gets out, she goes outside. She doesn't know quite who it was yet until the detectives Torres and Williams show her. And I assume that they did this to get a reaction out of her, that way they would hopefully give them some information on her side of the story. Torres and Williams investigate her yet again. She does not give them any more information. They chase her down, and then she says that they need to get information from her, that way she can save the next victim. But MaXXXine says that maybe the victim should save themselves. Later on, MaXXXine informs her agent about John Labbitt, who has been kind of stalking her, and she informs him about him, but her agent has not found any information on John Labbitt, but states that they will still help MaXXXine out. Later, when she's on the set of The Puritan 2, we see MaXXXine behind the camera, sitting on the seat with the director, Elizabeth Bender, and Molly Bennett is filming her flashback scenes. Molly Bennett tells MaXXXine about some advice and to not let her moment slip away, pretty much, kind of bragging to her about how she's back on the movie, and she mentions a Hollywood Hills party. Later on, John Labbitt has a gun and he's chasing MaXXXine until she gets into the house that she was at earlier with Elizabeth Bender. We see her PTSD from the events of X surface, and she just tells her to not let her personal life interfere with the film. But she runs into the house, and John Labbitt closely follows behind until he catches his breath, and then a police officer shows up and escorts him away. And then MaXXXine walks out and she speaks with the director, same thing, same advice. Then, later that night, we see MaXXXine attend a club where Labatt is actually following her, and she gets into the bathroom and then she escapes through a window, and then John Labbitt follows her, but he goes around. As he arrives, we see MaXXXine standing there with her agent. John Labbitt goes to shoot, but he's knocked out with the guy behind him, and as he awakes, MaXXXine is there watching him being compressed by a junkyard compressor. But before he is crushed, he tries to get her to stop, and he says that He'll give her all the money in the world. He'll do anything to live. She doesn't comply. He dies. He's crushed. And MaXXXine thanks him, and her agent states that that's what agents are for. Which, again, Hollywood expose, possibly. And then after this, we see that MaXXXine has pieced the pieces together that each killing has happened at this Starlight Drive address, or at least near it. And so she attends this address at the nighttime. Following behind her are the LAPD detectives Torres and Williams. So at this location where John Lavitt wanted her to attend, she goes up the stairs, and we see through the crack of a door, and we also hear it, MaXXXine's childhood video playing. So she steps inside, and the video is playing on a little TV. A man in all the leather black steps out, and MaXXXine recognizes him as her father, Ernest Miller, which was not a surprise to most people. It's been leading up to this. So then, like all killers, big reveals, he gets his long speech where he's angry at MaXXXine, and he reveals that he's actually making a Hollywood expose film. Again, is the movie a Hollywood expose? Possibly, or maybe they were just foreshadowing this event. He actually does state that MaXXXine he wants her to be the star of the movie, as that's what she's always wanted, and he says he wants to make her famous in this film. He also goes on about his faithfulness to God and his hatred towards the evil, specifically in Hollywood, the sinful lifestyle that they preach. He also states that he attempted to frame Tabby and Amber for the murders of the Night Stalker. He says that he ended up killing them because of the refusal of his over-tortured divine God. As he's speaking to her, she backs up before knocking a suitcase down the stairs, and out flies the dismembered body of Molly Bennett. And we see MaXXXine turn around, seeing the body fly down the stairs, and she feels some sympathy towards Molly. In the background, we hear the audio of the LAPD detectives stating that she could save a life. And so that's, I think, when MaXXXine really realized the weight of her actions. But then her father, Ernest Miller, suffocates her with a plastic bag, and she knocks out. When she wakes up, she's tied on some type of boardwalk with a pool around her, and her father, Ernest Miller, is recording for his film of the Hollywood expose. He tells her to put on a performance, as it's her big scene, and when he pulls out the satanic symbol hot rod, that he's going to mark with her unless she repents. And right before he goes in to scar her, Torres and Williams interrupt, causing a massive shoot down where they injure Ernest Miller, but he does get away, and then they begin to shoot all of his cohorts, and MaXXXine is able to untie herself before she's pulled in the water, and she has to stab herself out. And as she gets up, Torres and Williams say that they're going to go ahead and follow the boss, Ernest Miller, after they've shot most everyone, and they tell her to stay back and that backup is on the way. But MaXXXine says that so is she, and she grabs a big gun. When she gets up to the Hollywood sign, we see Torres and Williams walk out. Both of them have been murdered by Ernest. One of them has a cross lodged into their eyeball. MaXXXine follows over, and then we see Ernest Miller lying on the ground. He's hurt. Then right above, we see the police yell to her, telling her to put down the gun. All the while, MaXXXine begins to envision herself as a famous celebrity who is credited for helping the Night Stalkings and is attending the premiere for The Puritan too, where she's asked what advice that she would give to any fans who also want to become an actor. And she states to never give up, as it's going to be hard and that there's a lot that you'll have to do. And then she reveals that she's actually making the MaXXXine Minx biography, and it is being directed by Elizabeth Bender. And then as she returns back to reality, she tells her father to say it one last time, and they recite their iconic line. And her father afterwards apologizes for not giving her the life that she deserves, and she says no, that he gave her exactly what she needed. Divine intervention. Right before she shoots him to his demise. Fast forward 1 month later, we see MaXXXine on set of The Puritan 2, where the director states that MaXXXine has the star quality that Molly Bennett never had. And she asks her what she wants to do next in her career, and she says that she just never wants it to end. And then we pan out, and all the way up to the sky where we see the hills of the Hollywood sign, which it does not say Hollywood, it actually does say MaXXXine, which is the iconic photo that they were using for promotion. It pans out to the sky, all the way into space, and at the very, very end, after the credits, we see the Be Kind Rewind 80s reference. Rebuttal. Now that we're all caught up on the course of the movie overall, I would first like to begin with rebutting some of the criticism directed at the movie. 2.5. It's a mess with a lot of unnecessary storylines, unsurprising villains, and it's the weakest out of the three. I can see how they may believe that it has some unnecessary storylines, such as the peep show job that MaXXXine has, or maybe the extra scenes that MaXXXine has where she's getting her plaster made, or even some of the set scenes of the Puritan too. But even just attempting to name some unimportant scenes was actually difficult, as they all felt realistic to the experience of an Hollywood actor trying to get their start, as well as that each one has a reason and weight in the film. For example, the plaster scene furthers the understanding of her trauma due to the events in X, and the peep show job adds suspense and a deeper disgust than the killer. It's also just a unique horror scene, and it also further shows how devoted MaXXXine is to her job, as referenced by her friends earlier in the film, who say that she's always working, which showing is the best way of telling, so it gives MaXXXine a reason for being out at night and the reason why she didn't attend the party where Amber and Tabby would eventually die. Then, the Puritan 2 set scenes give us bigger stakes as to why she needs to let her past go and not let it interfere with her present and her future. So it shows that she has PTSD, but also how her past is being threatened to surface and be exposed. Finally, with the unsurprising villain accusations, I can agree that it was no complete surprise, but there were other possibilities for a villain, as there was the alleyway scare, and not to mention an X that we never get a confirmed Howard death. And so for this, personally, I wondered whether he may have lived, but I think this was the right choice as it comes full circle for the trilogy, and it's better than a character that was never referenced prior. Not to mention the Hollywood expose film that he was attempting at filming, since MaXXXine is everything that he was against. 3 out of 5. You will definitely find out who the villain is real fast in the last few minutes. X and Pearl are way better. I've seen them remark that X and Pearl are better than MaXXXine, and I can understand their opinion. To elaborate, I think that X and Pearl compared to MaXXXine are very different movies, as X and Pearl share the same very specific set, whereas MaXXXine is the first movie to astray from this, and so therefore it's definitely the black sheep. Just from a bird's eye view, X happens overnight and Pearl happens over a few days, and especially since Pearl was stuck on the farm her entire life, it is the first time in 2 to 3 years since the movies have been released that we are off of the set. I think that a lot of the viewers did not want this change, and so therefore it's definitely a big and different move to drift away from the formula of the first 2 movies. Now I know that some people were more hoping that MaXXXine would actually not be such a good person, and that they would hope she would go insane and kill anyone in her path. To explain, I've seen comments of people hoping that she would be a mere copy of Pearl with this clear psychosis, who would go batshit crazy and just kill everyone in her path. But I think that that would be the wrong decision, as that was already done in Pearl, and this movie takes place among a moving society. Furthermore, we do see a bit of a crazy MaXXXine in the alleyway scene, as well as when she got her agent to kill John Labatt. So I think that she did in fact take out everyone in her way, but only the bad people. And isn't that a good balance that they found? The trailer is way better than the whole movie, no depth at all, and Mia Goth's character is pretty much mute the whole movie. On the mute allegations, I know that she was a bit reserved and more mute the movie, and I too was sitting in the theater waiting for her response to some situations, and some of the times I never got those. And I do think that this was due to how vocal Pearl was. I mean, she literally got an 8-minute monologue of just her speaking. But MaXXXine was also more quiet in the first movie as well, so one could just say that's her personality. But I too do wish that we could have gotten more of her thoughts. Definitely the weakest of the 3. Silly storyline and ending, but if you like seeing retro shots of Hollywood and lots of classic studio sets, still nice to have them all wrapped up in one trilogy. I can agree that as a standalone film, it's definitely not strong enough to hold itself together, as you would need prior context to understand references to set up this film, her motivation, and even more. But in a trio, you're able to hold so much empathy and root for the heroine MaXXXine. I genuinely believe that what's great is that she didn't fall into the same trap that Pearl did, as she was strong enough to follow her dreams, and she made it big in Hollywood at 34 years old after many years of attempting to break into the Hollywood scene. We've seen her at only 8 years old in 1959 with the same dream. Whereas in Pearl, we practically see her give up after one attempt in her 20s due to her mother forcing her to stay on the farm and pursue a life there instead. And if you still do think that it's a silly ending, I would like to enlighten you that this ending is not yet confirmed. My personal thoughts. I think one of the most overdone things in horror is a simple stab killing that we've seen hundreds of times. And although this movie didn't sway away too much, I will say that I wasn't unimpressed with some of the death scenes. And I really did love the use of the highlighter as the stabbing scene, and it genuinely made me uncomfortable, which in horror, the use of uncomfortability, I wish it was used more in film since it's such a big factor of fright. Symbolism and Foreshadowing. I noticed that MaXXXine stepped on Theda Bara's Hollywood star in the beginning, which I think that's her stomping on her past, specifically in X of Pearl. Pretty much a fuck you to Pearl unknowingly, as Pearl was a big fan of Theda Bara, so much so that she named her Alligator or Crocodile, was it? Whatever, pet after her, who MaXXXine actually almost got eaten by on accident, which MaXXXine never did learn that, but she was in the lake with Theda Bara. When we see MaXXXine be so desensitized and uncaring of whether other people die, thinking that they should defend themselves, it does go to show that Pearl did impact her, as Pearl also made Howard desensitized to murder, which he did go to the war, but afterwards when he came back, I think that he was more okay with it afterwards when he seen Pearl. The advice that she gave to the press, never give up. I think that this could be used by Pearl in her earlier years, and I do wonder whether Pearl continued to audition or whether she instead began a series of killings with Howard afterwards, the events, which is why I think that they think that another movie could be made in between X and Pearl. That's all, but that's also not all. I make music that you may relate to, so that's Zyroom on all platforms from my own album, Existence is a Scandal, that you can stream until next time. Like, subscribe, check up on your friends, and I'll see you all next time.